Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is the latest in a series of live streams going through the various regions of the world of Westeros. Today we have reached the Reach, so we're going to be looking at House Tyrell, House Hightower, Old Town, Highgarden, places like that. But before I do get into that, what I always try to do with these live streams is just give you a little flavor of any bits of news that are going on out in the world to do with nerdy news of high fantasy TV shows and the like. There are two things that you may have missed. You may well have caught them. The first one you probably noticed was House of the Dragon has announced some new casting news. We had 4 more names. We have got, and I'll probably mispronounce some of these actors' names, Steve Toussaint as Corlys Velaryon, Eve Best as Rhaenys Velaryon, Rhys Ifans as Otto Hightower, and Sonoya Mizuno as Mysaria. Now, I think these are good. I've seen all of these actors in various things, so I'm quite pleased with the caliber of people that they're bringing in. Rhys Ifans in particular, I've seen in theatre actually, and he was excellent. I think what I would pick out from that, particularly as Mysaria, is in the book Fire and Blood, not a hugely central character, but there are hints that she had got quite a significantly influential roles, and the fact that she, the character and the actor playing that, is named this early on does seem to imply that she's going to be quite a significant player in the TV show. Other than that, I would just say this is just yet more progress moving towards actually filming. I think it would not surprise me if they start filming some point in a few months' time, if they've got up to, the main cast is already halfway there, I would have thought. Still a lot more to go, but all very good and very exciting. The other thing which has sort of passed me by, but is I was reminded of it just this week, is that they've been also casting for a Dungeons and Dragons movie. Now, you may remember there were a couple of attempts to do Dungeons and Dragons movies in the past, I think, not particularly successful. This one has got Chris Pine already signed up for it, and they just announced this week one of the stars of Bridgerton. I haven't watched Bridgerton, so I won't tell you the actor's name, but this does show that they're clearly, again, they're recruiting, they're trying to get people who are there at quite a high caliber or quite in demand. Obviously, Bridgerton was announced as being the most successful Netflix drama of all time, which is quite big. So moving on from Bridgerton is going to be quite a significant moment. So those are two things just to sort of get onto your radar. Before we get into the subject, quick thank yous to Glenn Thrasher. Thank you so much for the super sticker. That's very kind of you. Ryan Larkin as well. Josiah M. I think that was a super sticker. If it was a super chat, I didn't see a question attached to it. Mara Lee, thank you for your super sticker. You did a super chat as well, very generous, thank you. I will answer that one slightly later on. I've got a related question from someone else. I will tie those two together, I think. And also Hans van Rick, who said, the Reach seems to be perceived as softer and weaker in war than the other regions, but when you examine their history, is that accurate? So this is, I think, is quite a good place to sort of kick off an overview of the Reach. The Reach is the lushest, most fertile part of Westeros. It is, it's dominated by the River Manda and its tributaries, and it is the most populated region. It also has the access to the largest army. If all of the regions put all of their forces on the field, the largest army would be from the Reach. It's also got potentially the largest navy, or one of the largest navies. There are 3 big navies in Westeros: the Royal Fleet, the Iron Fleet, and the Red Wine Fleet, which is based off of the Reach. So they have gotten, they're the second richest region in all of Westeros, behind only the Westlands, and that's because they've got gold. But they provide exports of food and luxury goods right across Westeros. They are also, they pride themselves as being the heart of chivalry, the heart of sort of the Andal culture, as it were. When we're talking about the Vale of Arryn, they were probably the first parts of Westeros to become buying into the faith of the Seven and the Andal culture as a whole. But the Reach, probably more than anywhere else, completely embraced it. You'll find that not just in the fact that the Andals married into most of the main First Men families that were there in the Reach, but also you find things like House Hightower said, okay, you've got your religion, why don't you set up your main religion here? Why didn't you have the Starry Sept? And so they not just opened the doors and said, yes, Andals are welcome, but they also said, why don't you make this effectively the Vatican? Because we might think of the Great Sept as it is now as the biggest of the sort of the faith of the Seven sort of hubs, but for most of the time, for millennia, it was Old Town. It was the Starry Sept there. That's where the High Septon had always traditionally been based. So it considers itself to be the home of chivalry. When you're looking at tourneys happen in the Reach all the time. A huge amount of the tourneys that we read about are actually in the Reach. They do happen in other places, but a lot of them do happen in the Reach. Ashford Meadow, for example, is in the Reach. There are various other ones taking place around Highgarden, around the Mander, and all the rest of it. So this is what we're looking at, is this what I think we would probably think of as quite civilized. It's got the Old Town is the oldest city. For a very long time, it was the biggest city in all of Westeros. It's the center of learning. It was for a very long time the center of religion, religious life, certainly for the southern part of Westeros. And it is the heart of a lot of cultural life going on. This seems to be a good and nice place to be. So, however, in terms of sort of the castles and the martial prowess, to bring this back to Hans's question, yes, they can field a huge army. Yes, they can field a huge navy. They can put a huge navy out to sea. It is not as naturally defendable as some of the other parts of Westeros. So the north has got the neck, the natural pinch point. You get Dawn, which we will talk about incidentally in a bit, has got the potential to be an incredibly inhospitable place for anyone wishing to invade it. This is how they managed to survive outside of the Seven Kingdoms for so long. The Westlands have got their mountains, the Vale of Arryn have got their mountains, and so on. The Riverlands is a sort of an extension of the Reach is sort of an extension of what we're talking about with the Riverlands. It's largely low-lying, and this is where a lot of battles do naturally happen. So when you say they're talking about weaker in war, they probably can field some of the finest troops. That are certainly the Marcher Lords, who are the lords around the sort of the south and east part of the Reach, have been in constant battle with Dawn over millennia, and this is where places like House Tarly come in. They have got strong histories of martial prowess. Some of the rest, perhaps not so much. House Tyrell, being based at Highgarden. Highgarden is a beautiful castle, but it is not very easily defended. That's the whole point about it. It looks nice and it is a nice place to live, but compared to the Eyrie, say, or Casterly Rock, this is not the place that you wish to be hiding in. Old Man Robbo saying, Not a question from me, but thank you for the super chat anyway, saying not a question from me, but if any moderators see a good question, please use this. Excellent. Well, I shall keep an eye out for any moderators picking up any good questions. Googly Woogly, hi there, saying no question. There's a lot of no questions here. Just a thank you for providing a steady stream of infotainment. You've built a great community here, and I hope you're proud of what you've achieved. Cheers, mate. Thank you. It is a fantastic community, and it warms my heart to see people in the live chat every week, just building that community and finding a safe place to discuss things that we enjoy talking about. Okay, and I think I had one more. Yes, Legends of the Brave Bard by C.T. James, saying smash that like button. Thank you very much. I think that's me caught up in the chat. Andrew Cage is picking up, talking about, I think it's High Garden, saying it's not Storm's End, but it has thick and high concentric walls. The maze bottlenecks and invading force, not that bad, only sacked once or twice ever. Yeah, so it has High Garden, the thing which is probably its most unique defining feature in terms of its defense is it's got between two walls. It's got, and it does have these concentric walls, which is a classic castle design. It has a rose maze, which in times of peace is a very nice place to be wandering with people through this sort of maze of rose bushes. But in terms of in times of war, then having briar bushes there as an extra layer of defense is interesting. It's making the best of the surroundings that you're in. So yeah, it is not undefendable. It is a castle, and it is strong, and it is hard to get into. But compared to other castles in Westeros, its primary aim is more to do with being lived in rather than being defendable. Okay, so question from Dawn Bartle, saying, hi, Robert. Not being able to join recent live streams and undergoing tests in hospital. I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope you're better soon. I'm pretty poorly at the moment. Hope to be in live chats once again. Well, I'm sure everyone in the chat will wish you all the best. I don't know what's wrong, but I hope it gets sorted out as soon as possible. The question I want to ask is, how will you deal with the release of The Winds of Winter? Are you taking the time to read it in full or other? Yes, I will whenever it comes out, and I'm not going to do a full update on where we're at, other than to say George R. R. Martin has said he has written hundreds and hundreds of pages last year. He's still got hundreds more to go. So it's not going to appear certainly in the next few months, I don't think, but he is making progress. When it does come out, yes, I'm going to read it page cover to cover, probably more than once. And I will probably also listen to it. I'm really enjoying listening to books at the moment as well. I haven't fully going to cover it. I suspect that I will start with a few overviews, trying not to be spoilery, because I know that people will read it at different paces. But for those who have finished reading it or don't mind having it spoiled, then watch Jaime's story or arc is in the book, or what's happening with Tyrion, so something high-ish level, and then answering some specific questions. There always are with these things. There will be some specific issues that come out that people just want to explore in a little bit more detail. So that's how I imagine doing it. And then once everyone's had a chance to read it, once we're a little bit further down the line, then I might go through in a slightly more granular level after that one. But yes, I'm really looking forward to it. Randy Babandi, good name. Love you, Robert. Please never stop doing the Q&As. Thank you. That's really kind. I'm not planning on doing it. I have, incidentally, I think this time last week I mentioned my patrons. I give my patrons a chance every now and then. My $10 patrons, one of the perks at their level is being able to influence what we cover in these live streams, and lots of different things came out from that, lots of great ideas. Definitely will carry on doing Q&As like this. That's definitely going to be happening. Also, a few other things that there seem to be a reasonable amount of support for Lord of the Rings content, whether during these or doing sort of other live content on Lord of the Rings, and getting other people in to have conversations. That's something I used to do quite a lot, actually, is having someone in for these live streams and talking to them, getting an opportunity for different perspectives on issues, which I think works really well. So we'll certainly be doing a few more of them as well in the future. So do not fear, the live streams will continue. Question from Wolf Wilson. Do you think that Garland and Willis Tyrell will play any significant role? They seem to be rather ignored by the fandom, and really I just want to hear more about them. Okay, so yes, they are. So the Tyrells, I mean, on the TV show, they kept the Tyrell family relatively small. They couldn't include every character. It's understandable, but it meant that they missed out a couple of characters who are quite interesting and quite important to the books. So Willis Tyrell is one of the children so Mace has got a whole series, I think 4 children off the top of my head. Willis is the oldest. He is the heir, and he is at this time of we've reached, he is in Highgarden. He's in charge of things happening there. He is a more studious type. He is a lot more seemingly serious. He seems quite intelligent. He seems quite capable, but he's not really this kind of riding into battle on a horse kind of person. So he is there holding down the fort. Then we get Garland. Garland is the second son, I think. Now, he is a very good fighter. He is a knight, but he is in stark contrast to Loras Tyrell, the youngest. Loras is all about having the beautiful armor, courting the attention, getting cool nicknames and all the rest of it. That is what he seems to be about. Garland is the antithesis of that. He's always about the integrity of the person and saying valorous acts are still valorous even if minstrels do not sing about them. He has a few good conversations with Tyrion about this, and he also talks to Sansa. He does seem to care about people. He doesn't seem to have a huge ego. He is now heading back with Elena Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns. They're heading back home. So that's the first thing to say about them, is that they exist. They are there, and they are an important part of the family tree. And whatever Cersei does in King's Landing, and we will definitely cover that, there are going to be at least 2 hale and healthy and hearty sons of Tyrell over somewhere in the Reach. So the Cersei will not be able to destroy House Tyrell in the same way that she seemingly destroyed it on the show. It will continue. It will continue strong. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing is that I think Garland in particular, because of his conversations he's had with the Tyrion in particular, I think that he will have managed to be one of those people that Tyrion listens to and takes advice from, and will start to realize it's not all about getting the adulation for the thing you want. It's about doing the right deed. And Tyrion is not always a particularly good character, sort of morally good character, but he does obviously have a lot of upsides, and one of those is his ability to learn. And so I think this is going to be quite important. And then I think the third thing I would say, I did have a third thing I was going to say about them, yes, is that the Tyrells do not have a POV. Whereas yes, I can say these were going to be important characters, they are clearly there, and we'll talk about this again in a moment. They are going to be in charge of a lot of the defense of the Reach against what Euron is up to. That's a lot of their job, going to be coordinating. Willis is going to be doing a lot of coordinating of that. Garland, I suspect, is going to be leading forces. Garland, incidentally, he was the person who dressed up in Renly's armor during the Battle of the Blackwater, which meant lots of people thought that this was Renly's ghost coming in. He didn't feel the need for people to see him in battle. He thought it was far more important to gain the victory than for him to gain all the plaudits. But because of the fact that none of these are POV characters, and George R. Martin has said that he's not introducing any new main POV characters, we shouldn't necessarily take him on his word for that, but that's what he said for the Winds of Winter. Don't expect us to be seeing what is happening specifically with House Tyrell in Highgarden for most of the Winds of Winter. They will be doing things off screen, and we will be hearing about them through other characters. Specifically, I think people in Cersei and the like will be hearing about what is happening with the Tyrells, and that is how we're going to learn about what's going to be happening with them. So that's the sort of backdrop. I think that they are deliberately there as a sort of an antithesis of what we might think of as the Tyrell type. Mace Tyrell does not come across as being particularly clever, but clearly Willis is, and then Loras is apparently very much obsessed with his appearance and how other people perceive him, and Garland is the opposite of that. So they're actually showing House Tyrell to be a lot more rounded than a lot of the other houses we've got. Question from Ultraviolence saying, do you think Loras is as injured as we are led to believe? What would be the advantage of exaggerating his injuries? I do have a question from one of my patrons, so I hope about, I think, answering that almost that exact same question. So I'll wrap these two up now. So Loras was concerned about and the Tyrells as a whole were concerned about the fact that the Red Wine Fleet, which we've already mentioned, huge fleet, very important, central to how the Reach and Tyrells manage their affairs, was being held by the Crown in around Dragonstone, basically besieging Dragonstone, which after Stannis had gone it just hadn't fallen yet to the new powers that be. And Loras and the Tyrells were concerned because they knew that Euron had been raiding up and down the Reach. He'd taken the Shield Islands. He was a danger. At some point, he was going to be doing even more damage. And so they were desperate for the fleet to be released from where it was so that it could come around to engage with Euron. The solution they came to was that Loras would lead an assault on Dragonstone. Loras did this. Again, this happens off-screen, off-page, so we don't see it happen. We just hear the reports when they come back. The Admiral of the Navy, Orain Waters, was the person who tells us what happens. Now, he may not be 100% reliable, but what he says is they captured Dragonstone, which is good, but in the assault, Loras Tyrell was gravely injured. And I was just flicking through the Song of Ice and Fire, actually, the last couple of books, just in preparation for this live stream, and the amount of times we're told this by different people is, for what is perhaps a relatively small point, is really quite significant. It's 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 times we're told this fact. Loras is unwell. Marjorie's so concerned about Loras being injured, she keeps on going to the Sept and praying for him. We hear about it in lots of different ways. So this is clearly something George R. R. Martin wants us to be aware of. Now, he is said to be dying from his wounds. That's what we're told. We haven't seen him, so we don't know. The only information we have is, as I say, from Aurane Waters. I say he's not necessarily the most reliable of people, because shortly after this, when Cersei gets captured by the High Sparrow, he then disappears off with his fleet, and it would appear probably sets himself up as effectively a pirate king in the Stepstones. So we can't necessarily believe everything he says. He's not a true loyalist, which is a long preamble to the question of, is Loras actually injured? I think probably is the answer. He probably is injured. The question is he as injured as we are told? Cersei has certainly taken the message that he's going to die. She thinks that that's it now. He's gone. I don't need to worry about him anymore. But he seems to be hanging around for a while. So the implication that this is a very, very slow thing that's happening, whatever's going on there, these wounds, they weren't so deadly that he died straight away. He may well recover. Even if he had got bad wounds, he may well recover. And it does make sense, I think, for the Tyrells to hedge their bets a bit here. They seem to have understood that there's a lot going on in King's Landing, and they have now started to spread their forces back out again. Loras being on Dragonstone is indisputably, potentially, a very important strategic move for them. Because if you've got Dragonstone, then you can control the Blackwater Bay, the shipping that comes into King's Landing. So that will be very important. And if in the future the Tyrells decide that they wish to shift their loyalties away from Cersei and to, say, Aegon VI, that would be a very important point for them to have. It also means that if somebody else comes and tries to land there, like, say, Daenerys at the end of the book, then she will have somebody to be who is going to be defending it. It isn't just going to be a matter of, as on the show, her turning up and just walking into an empty castle. There will be a defensive force on there. Okay, question from Shah. Hi, Robert. Hope all is well. It is. Thank you. I assume it is consensus that Cersei will plot to have quite a number of Tyrells murdered quite soon. In the show, only Elena survived. Do you think she will do so in the books? Who will be the official house leader afterwards? Sansa was once considered for marriage to Willis. Yes, she was. This will certainly not come to pass, but might they by some chance meet at last in a council at the end? Okay, so just to pick up on that last point, yes, there is definitely a chance that she could meet him at the end if Willis survives. I suspect he might not, though. We'll come on to the future there at some point. In terms of Elena surviving whatever attack Cersei does, no. Yes, she will survive, but it won't just be her. There will be Garland, there'll be Willis, there'll be Loras. There might even be Mace Tyrell. It might just be Marjorie in the end, who out of the sort of the main Tyrells, who ends up dying. So for those who want the sort of the build up to this Cersei's likely attack, and I think her blowing up the Great Sept during Marjorie's trial, or her proposed trial, is actually quite likely. There might be other ways that George R. R. Martin does it, but he certainly played up the idea that Cersei is entranced by the idea of wildfire when blowing up the Tower of the Hand, and that does seem to work for her to sort of take it up to the next notch. But the prompt for this isn't just her being jealous of Marjorie. Yes, there is that, her being concerned that Marjorie is going to be having a greater influence over her son than she has. Yes, there is that, but the cause of this will be the fact that she will be prompted by discovering what she thinks is evidence that her uncle, Kevin Lannister, was murdered by the Tyrells. This, however, is just being framed by Varys, who's operating behind the scenes. We have this in the last chapter of the Dance with Dragons. This is basically, we get Varys admitting his plot, admitting and all pretty much apologizing to Kevin Lannister, saying, I wasn't planning to kill you. It's not anything personal. It's just that you're doing a very good and effective job. So I need to kill you. And in doing that, I'm going to be framing other people. So this will mean that Cersei, who immediately her thought will be, what would her father do? Her father, she thinks, would just show, you cannot do this to any Lannisters, and she will take exact revenge on the Tyrells, on whatever Tyrells she can get her hands on. And I think that will probably just be Marjorie as well. There'll be a few other minor Tyrells as well, but mostly just that. And if she can do that at the same point and in the same way as getting rid of the threat from the High Sparrow, then she will do that. So blowing up the Great Sept is probably the way she's going to go with that. But what that means is that compared to what happened on the show, this is not going to wipe out all her enemies. It is going to be a very short-sighted tactical move. It's not strategic in any way. What it will do is it will turn the Tyrells against her. They will not be decimated as they were on the show. They will still be in a huge amount of strength, both back in the Reach, and also there is it was in one of the pre-released chapters from the Winds of Winter, the possibility, a hint, a rumor that Mace Tyrell was coming back out of the capital and heading back down to Storm's End with his army. So he may well survive with his army. Even if he isn't out of the capital at that point, we've been told a couple of times, there are a lot more Tyrell soldiers in the capital than Lannister soldiers. So her annoying the Tyrells, or not just annoying them, making them angry and making them her enemies, is actually an incredibly short-sighted move. Added to which, the Faith of the Seven is also not just going to take it lying down if she does blow up the Great Sept. So she's going to think that she wins a great victory, but in reality, she's just storing up huge amounts of problems for herself. And finally, the people of King's Landing are not going to approve of somebody who just randomly blows up buildings, killing probably hundreds of innocent civilians. They will also turn on her. So she thinks that she will do a masterstroke of a move, but she will, in the end, be in a worse strategic position as a result of it. So that was that one. Question from Nicola Tricola, saying, hi, Robert. As always, thank you for keeping us sharp and entertained. You are very welcome. May I ask, what do you foresee for House Tarly? I believe Sam is a fan and George R. R. Martin's favourite, and we may get a happy ending for him. But if Night's Watch will no longer be needed, what would that be? Well, I'll talk about House Tarly slightly more broadly first, because I think one of the things the show did have was Randall Tarly suddenly turning and joining up with the Lannisters. It was never really made clear why, but I think in the books it will become relatively clear. Randall Tarly is in King's Landing. He is an incredibly powerful person, and if Cersei does wish to in some way land this attack on the Tyrells, she will need to make sure that she's got somebody from the Reach on her side. if she can get Randall Tarley on her side, and if she can say, you can be the new Lord Paramount of the Reach, that will be a huge prize to be dangling in front of him. And it also goes back to the fact that the Tyrells as a family, they are like we were talking about the Tullys a few weeks ago. They are not the most powerful family in the Reach. So there are a lot of other noble families in the Reach who, when the Tyrells were made the Lord Paramount, went, hang on, why them? With the Tullys, it was because House Tully turned and helped the Targaryens first before anyone else did. So having got rid of the Harlan the Black, it was a simple decision for the Targaryens. Well, we'll just appoint the person who seems most loyal. Similarly, in the Reach, what you had was the Gardeners, they'd been kings of the Reach for millennia, claiming their ancestry all the way back to Garth Greenhand, this kind of legendary ancient figure. And they had ruled undisputed all that time. The Tyrells were their stewards, so they were the people who were just doing the administration around the outside for the kings. And what happened when the Targaryens invaded was that the Gardeners took to the field, which became the Field of Fire, and they were killed, and then the Targaryens looked around for who are we going to put in charge. Now, there were many other possible candidates. They could have gone for the Hightowers, who were the one of the oldest, certainly one of the richest, certainly definitely one of the most influential families. You've got we've already talked about the Redwynes, you've got the Tarleys, you've got House Peak, you've got lots of big, ancient, important families. And they chose the Tyrells, it would appear, simply because the Tyrells had not put any forces into the field against them. So they were rewarded for being unimpeachably the only people who did not face off against the Targaryens. Now, that meant that there were a lot of families who thought that they probably were second in line and weren't given what they were due. One of those almost certainly will be House Tarly. So these are ancient kind of grudges going back a very long way. So I think that what will happen is that Cersei will get House Tarly on her side and will say to Randall Tarly, you can be the new Lord Paramount of the Reach. All you have to do is go over there and claim it, and that's it. And Randall Tarly, huge ego, but also matched with huge talent, will probably go and do that. But again, if that is what happened, that would be an incredibly short-sighted move by Cersei. She may think that she's removing potential threats from Reach forces within King's Landing, but actually she's just emptying out potentially loyal forces. So that's what I think is happening there. In terms of Sam, yes, I agree. I think Sam is one of the few characters who will have something akin to a happy or uplifting ending. The Night's Watch, I agree, probably we won't have a need for them following this. So what does he do? Well, I think the obvious thing is for him to be following his calling to be a maester. Now, we'll get onto Old Town in a bit, but I think what we'll probably find is that most of the infrastructure of the Citadel, it will be destroyed by that point. So what somebody like Sam, who may have time to forge a couple of links or so on his chain, he seems to be a very intelligent person. He seems to be able, it does take some time, 2 or maybe 3 in a year seems to be the absolute maximum that you can do in terms of forging your links, the links of a chain. And that's not enough to make a full maester's chain. He will not have qualified as a full maester by that point. So perhaps he could go back and set up the Citadel. Perhaps the show ending of him being the trusted maester. Which other maester would you have if you were King Bran and you decide that you want to have a maester? So perhaps that might work. I think that in any event, the initial thing that he wanted to do, being a maester, is where he is going to end up. He is going to have something which is good and uplifting at the end of this and will give us a little bit of hope. Chris and Sarah saying, hi Robert, do you think Elena really helped poison Joffrey? In the books it's still ambiguous. Preston Jacobs seems to think it was only Littlefinger. Well, I don't know. I don't think I've seen that video, so I don't know where that evidence comes from. But no, the clear implication, I think, in the books is that Elena is involved in this as well. I can't remember all of the instances off the top of my head, but she adjusts the hairnet, which basically is her taking the poison. So because the hairnet was where Sansa's hairnet was where the poison had been attached. So yes, I think she's definitely involved in this, and I think that it is for as simple a reason as she does not want Marjorie to be married to Joffrey. She spends a huge amount of time asking people about Joffrey, what his character is like. She definitely wants the Tyrells to be married into the royal family, but does she want her daughter to be married to Joffrey? Would you want your daughter to be married to Joffrey? No, she's a clever woman. She can figure this one out. So I think that, yes, she was definitely the motive, the means, the motive were both there, and the opportunity was definitely there as well. So I think that she was involved, and I think that this was her longer-term plan to be getting Marjorie to be married to Tommen, who not only seems nicer than Joffrey, but also is a lot more manageable by Marjorie. Marjorie can manipulate him in a way that perhaps Joffrey, he could be manipulated, but only in certain directions. Devil asking, does this mean that Jon isn't a Targaryen in the books? No, he is a Targaryen, and he's half Targaryen, half Stark in the books. I'm not going to get into all of that, but that's where we're at. So Missy's Castle Dreams saying, hi Robert, I hope you're well. Thank you, I am. Received my Traveller's Guide shirt this week. Don't forget to plug your merch. Don't have any props today, but yes, Deep Geek merch is available. Link down below. I'm getting better at that. Do you believe Loras Tyrell is really injured? This was the question that I got before. Could there be a chance that he's somehow holding Dragonstone for future purposes to benefit to the Tyrell family? Yes, I've covered that one already. Hopefully that answer worked for you. Dominic Vaughan saying, hi Robert, hope you're well. Looking forward to my weekly slice of IDG. Elena's revelation to Jaime about her role in the Purple Wedding was really powerful in the show. How do you see this playing out in the books? So I think Elena will get a moment like that, but I don't think it will be the same way. I don't think that she will be saying it to Jaime. I think she will say it to Cersei's face. That's just my personal guess. I think this is because the way that the books are going to sort of pan out with Cersei is that we've already gone through the fact that she's going to be getting her revenge on the Tyrells, but it's going to be incredibly short-sighted. She's going to turn the people of King's Landing against her. She's going to turn the bulk of the Tyrells who are still around and about against her. She's going to turn the Faith of the Seven against her. She's going to leave King's Landing open and vulnerable to attack from Aegon VI, she will have to escape all the way back up to Casterly Rock. Now, I will cover Euron a lot more in just a moment, but I think what we are going to see is that Euron and Cersei will team up. Now, one other aspect of this is the fact that Cersei has angered the Faith of the Seven. What she really needs now is somebody to complete the job, which is to destroy the Starry Sept, destroy the home base of the Faith of the Seven, not just the Great Sept. And I think Euron is going to do that in attacking Old Town. So that will then make both of them, when I say sort of complete the job, the Faith of the Seven is nationwide. So there will be people across the country who are out to get her, but also out to get Euron. So they will appear to be on the same side. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Their alliance seems to be more apparent and obvious when you start seeing what the particular strategic situation will be. She, however, will probably say, I want you to be doing things for me. And rather than having Jaime pitch up at High Garden, then I suspect we might see Euron do it and perhaps bring Elena Tyrell to Cersei herself, because Cersei has got a grudge against Elena Tyrell and she will want to see her face. We've already established this. This is what on the show, that was what Cersei wanted. She wanted to have Elena brought to her. But I think that we will see Elena Tyrell perhaps even to Cersei's face as she is dying. And I think she will get some sort of ending like this, be able to say, and I killed your son. So I think that is, she is still going to get that really good ending, but it won't be the exact same way we saw on the show. Catherine Furseth saying, "Hi Robert, I wonder what, if any, role the Reach will play in the rest of the Song of Ice and Fire books. It's generally assumed that the Tyrells will be gone and no one knows what the Hightowers are there for or up to. How do you see the plot concerning the Reach played out in the next two books? What role will the Reach houses play, if any, in defeating Ice and Fire?" Okay, so I will do this. I've got a lot of questions in and around this, what actually we've sort of talked around the outside of the Reach, but actually what is happening in the Reach. So I'm going to do the high level here, and then we'll dig into sort of the detail about what's happening. So there's going to be a massive battle off the coast of the Reach. We know this. This is Euron. He's been waiting for the Red Wine fleet to arrive. He's going to be attacking. He's going to make a huge sea battle. He's strapped magic users, priests, his own pregnant lover to the front of boats, sacrifices everywhere, magic going all over the place. He is just here. Blood will be spilt into the water. Krakens will be called. It's happening at the same time as what's happening over in Slaver's Bay with the blowing of Dragonbinder. This is magic happening everywhere. It's going to be absolutely haywire. This is what Euron's plan is to start with. So there's this huge amount of battle going on there. I think, for reasons that I spoke about when we were talking last time about the Iron Islands, I think that he will get a dragon. Then I think we've probably got a period of where there's going to be a sort of a phony war going on. He may well raid a few other places. There will almost certainly be some sort of people starting to fear the Euron's movements. We're going to see the Tyrells trying their best to shore up defenses, the Hightowers trying their best to shore up defenses. We've seen that Euron is trying to get into Old Town. We've seen he's sent some spies in there already. But I think that there will be a bit of time, a block of time, which will allow Sam to spend some time in Old Town, incidentally, before Euron attacks. And I think that he will. I think that he will get what he wants from Old Town, which I suspect is probably magical knowledge from the library. Perhaps that's by sending people in. Perhaps it's something, some other way in advance of him attacking. But then Old Town will burn, and this is not just just he will come and burn it all there again. This is going to be a huge magical battle. The High Towers have had their fences. Leighton High Tower, supposed to be a magic user up the top of the High Tower. There is going to be a huge amount of battle going on. The dragon fire, the city itself burning, the library, the Great Library burning. That will undoubtedly lead to mass population move away from the coast inland. At the same time, I think we're going to see Cersei heading over to Casterly Rock, and we're going to see Randall Tarley coming in, trying to claim the Reach for himself. Then we have got Euron and Cersei. As I say, it makes strategic sense for both of them to join up with each other. It also seems to make thematic sense from what we've seen from these visions that Euron seems to be getting. So those two will meet up, and Euron is going to just push inland. He's not going to stay off the coast all the time. He's going to start pushing inland through the Reach. And heading in towards the Riverlands. So that is where what we're going to be seeing over the course of the next book or so. Huge amounts of devastation happening all the way across the south of the Reach. Movement of people into the Riverlands, which is going to further complicate the matters that are going on there. And people trying to work out how to defend themselves against this emerging threat from Euron. So that's the sort of the high level of what is going to be happening. Adam Wilson, thank you for the super chat, saying, in a previous video, you had stated Euron burning down Old Town, and I was wondering if Hagar, I think that must be Jack and Hagar, could kill the dragon before too much damage is done. Now, this comes, so Jack and Hagar is in Old Town. He is hiding as Pate. And we will see, we haven't got specific details of why he's there, but the joining up the dots seems to imply that he might be hunting for this book called The Death of Dragons, which kind of makes sense and I'm not going to go into the Faceless Men theory again, but it kind of ties in with what they might be after as an organization. Now, what The Death of Dragons almost certainly is, however, I personally suspect, is not just at how do you kill specific dragons. We know what, if you look back through Fire and Blood, we know what kills dragons. You can get a lucky shot with sort of like a ballista or something like that has worked 3 or 4 times that we know of. It's rare, but it does happen. Dragons can kill other dragons relatively easily, or not relatively easily, but this seems to be the way that most of the dragons seem to be dying in the Dance of the Dragons. You can just swamp them, as happened in the Dragon Pit. Just thousands of people, if the dragons can't get out, you can just swamp them. But my personal feeling is that the Death of the Dragons is probably more about how do you stop dragon eggs from hatching as live dragons. And that seems to be what the Maesters did the first time around. After the Dance of the Dragons, there weren't many dragons. In fact, there were 4 dragons left after the Dance of the Dragons, only one of which was in the control of House Targaryen. So they didn't really need to do much killing of live dragons, but there were a lot of dragon eggs that they needed to make sure weren't going to hatch. And so I think that the Death of Dragons is about how do you prevent further dragons from being born, which is probably going to be a disappointment to whoever reads it, because they're looking for what's the way to kill dragons. So that's a sort of a convoluted way around to say that I don't think that Jaqen H'ghar is going to be able to shoot the dragon out of the sky. I don't think that's what he's there for. I think what he's looking for is a longer term solution to how do we get rid of dragons to prevent this happening in the future. Chazaristic saying, hi Robert, get well soon mate. I'm very well already, thank you very much. Can you please give a birthday shout out to Mathieu Dominique? Happy birthday, Mathieu. I hope you have a fantastic day if it's today. Dominic Vaughan, thank you so much, saying, thoughts on Leo Tyrell at the Citadel? Is he just a throwaway character as part of Sam's arc, or do you think he will play a role in the last 2 books? Right, so we are introduced to a lot of characters in the Citadel. There's sort of a gang that we're introduced to. Now, this group, we sort of meet them in the prologue, and also, or if we don't meet all of them, but we meet some and hear reference to others, and then we hear them when Sam arrives right at the end of the book. Now, what role are they going to all play? Well, there are a lot of characters. You say there's a Tyrell, there's probably Elena Sorella, who is one of the Sand Snakes, effectively. So Martell. There are a lot of interesting characters who are there. My take at a high level is that these characters are there to make Sam's next bit of his story interesting, because if left to his own devices, then what we would have is 3 or 4 chapters of Sam just doing some research and learning how to do each bit of the Maester's chain and learning specific things about a specific area. I mean, they wouldn't be that interesting. So I think what we're going to see is 4 or 5 chapters maybe of Sam. I mean, I don't know how much George R. R. Martin's going to write on this, but Sam tends not to get huge amounts of chapters per book. And as we've already talked about, then there's a sort of a time limit on Sam in Old Town with Euron. So we're going to get 4 or 5 chapters maybe of Sam doing whatever research that he's wanting to do. But while he's at doing that, there are lots of people trying to do things around the outside. Now, this kind of reads a bit like the first chapters when John arrives up at the wall. We meet John. Through John, we meet a lot of interesting characters. We get Lord Mormont, we get Maester Aemon, we get Sam himself, we get Alliser Thorne. And so it's almost as if George R. R. Martin has created these characters who will have, yes, they've got their own character arcs and all the rest of it, but it is to make John's life at the wall interesting so that he can develop as a character while he is there. And the same, I think, is going to happen with Sam, who, let's face it, he is potentially in his element, but also he is not necessarily the best person to be sort of putting himself forward. So being part of this gang is going to be absolutely central to his important. So in terms of the individual characters, I think that it's not a coincidence that these people are, a lot of them seem to be significant in one way or other. As I say, we've got what appears to be Jaqen H'ghar, we've got a Martell, we've got a Tyrell. It's not a coincidence that that's the case. They could have just had random other people. We are going to see a lot of plot lines tied in with this, and in particular, I think with the Tyrells, I think we will see how this links in with Willis Tyrell trying to coordinate the efforts of the Reach as a whole to defend against Euron. question from Mara Lee. Thank you so much, saying, I love your channel. Thank you, Robert, for providing everyone excellent stories and content. Love to Dan. Thank you so much, Mara. I hugely appreciate that, and all of your support, as you know. And as Kolnitsky says, Mara Lee is a goddess. Absolutely. So Cole Carlsnark just picking up on this, saying Sam may get more chapters in A Dream of Spring as a sort of an epilogue voice, perhaps writing things down, but not in a cheesy TV show way. Yeah, I think that there's a good chance that his the number of chapters he gets may well increase. His story in The Winds of Winter is him in Old Town and then escaping from Old Town. I think that's pretty much what we're going to get from him. In the final book, then, yes, this is a lot of this is going to be about revelations, learning things, learning about Jon's background, learning about the others and all the rest of it. He will get some bits of information while he's in the Citadel, I'm sure, but him being able to join things up is going to be absolutely critical. So, yes, we will probably see a few more chapters for him in A Dream of Spring, and then they're kind of tying things up at the end. I'm trying to think if anyone's ever asked me who the last chapter is going to be in The Winds of Winter. I think the last one is going to be Jon, but the penultimate one may well actually be Sam. It would not surprise me in the slightest. Or maybe even George R. R. Martin might turn them around. I'm just thinking of this on my feet, actually, but we know that George R. R. Martin, he talks about the end of A Song of Ice and Fire as sort of echoing the ending of The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings has Frodo heading off away, having carried his burden for so long, but he can no longer stay in this world that he played such a crucial role in saving, and so he departs it. That is going to be echoed in Jon departing the Seven Kingdoms, heading north of the Wall. Jon, I've said this several times, but I think it's absolutely true. George R. R. Martin is writing Jon like he's an Aragorn character, but actually he's Frodo. Frodo has a Sam, Jon has a Sam as well. And the way that The Lord of the Rings ends actually is not with Frodo going off. It's Sam returning back home. And Sam having that moment and saying, well, he said, I'm back. And that's the end of The Lord of the Rings. And so it would not actually, on reflection, surprise me if we have Jon heading off. But then our last bit, maybe as an epilogue, we have Sam there being the person, and we see just that hint of a happy ending of him with his family at the end. Perhaps George R. R. Martin's not just got a hard heart. Maybe deep inside him, he does want and need us to have that little bit of hope just at the very end. I hope so. Anyway, question from Adam Wilson. Just saying thank you for answering my question, and a super thank you for bringing us all the content you do. You're very welcome. Thank you so much. Dominic Vaughan saying hi, need to depart now. Thanks to IDG and the mods, as ever, great work. Mods, thank you so much. I think I've got a full team in there today, so thank you. You do an excellent job. If you are there in the live chat, if you could give a little bit of love to the moderators, I would hugely appreciate it. They do fantastic work. Question from Sam Chastain. This is from Patron, saying, hi Robert, I'm a huge fan and excited to ask my first question as a patron. Excellent. This is one of the, at all levels of patronage, you get your questions prioritized on my live streams. If you're interested, first of all, I should say thank you, patrons. I do try and say it every time. I genuinely mean it. I cannot do this. I cannot dedicate the time I do to this without your support. So thank you. If you are interested in supporting the channel, if you would like to get priority questions for live streams, then check out my Patreon page. There's a link down in the description. Sam says, do you think the showrunners only had Sam cure Ser Jorah's grayscale on the show to find a way to get him back beside Dany for the end of the story. Do you think that there will be any attempt to cure John Connington's grayscale in the books by the Maesters or anyone else, or will it kill him? It seems like the Citadel will be quite busy dealing with Euron's attack, and George R. R. Martin may be playing with the idea of a grayscale outbreak in King's Landing. Would love to know your thoughts. Yes, so the grayscale on the show was a bit of a damp squib, so I'm not going to I'm not going to sort of explore that too much. They introduced the concept, then they had Jorah getting this highly infectious disease which was going to kill him, and then he just went off and got cured and came back. Nothing really happened from it. That's not going to be the case in the books. In the books, we have got John Connington who has it. Now, this is important because he is closest to Aegon, and he is hiding it at the moment. Now, he will be in King's Landing at some point. I absolutely agree with you that I think George R. R. Martin is playing with this thought, this idea. We've seen it all the way through The World of Ice and Fire, Fire and Blood, this idea of having contagious diseases. These things go along with, we get war, famine, pestilence. These things he's going to be playing with all of the horsemen of the apocalypse, I can assure you. And so the most likely place for this to happen, I suspect, is King's Landing. We hear rumours of it, there being outbreaks of the Grey Plague sort of further east into Essos. That will be brought, I suspect, into King's Landing. And John Connington has brought it from Essos over to Westeros. So, yes, I think that this is what's going to happen. I don't think that the cure. I kind of move a little bit on this. The fact is that this, and I would at some point I will do a theory video on this. Oh, I'd love to hear somebody else's theories on this. But the fact is, George R. R. Martin introduced this idea of grayscale as a sort of an anti-Valyrian thing, because it first came as the Prince Garen's sort of dying, anguished vengeance upon the Valyrians. And that is the genesis of it. And it does seem to be something which does impact those with hints of Valyrian blood, perhaps even more than other things. There was this, for a long time, there was this thought that Targaryens couldn't catch normal diseases like other people. But it appears that grayscale is something that they can do. So it would appear to be susceptible to that, perhaps more than most folks. So George R. R. Martin's introduced that concept. However, he deliberately turned away from exploring the origins of this to a much greater extent. He had the option when Tyrion was there going through the sorrows, and he gets sort of pulled under the water. We know that he wrote an extra chapter for Tyrion there, which was going to be extra magical. It was clearly going to be involving the Stone Men, the Shrouded Lord probably, and he decided not to go that way. So he kind of shelved that. So I do wonder whether it's not going to play the role, as wide a role as he'd originally planned for it to. That said, I think that the fact that John Connington has it will become important. It will lead to some sort of outbreak in King's Landing, and I think that it is going to be stopped by fire, by dragon fire. This is very echoey. King's Landing, in many ways, is inspired by London, and in London, we had the Great Plague, and then the next year, that was in 1665, and then the next year, 1666, that was wiped out by the Great Fire of London. And that is something that it's such a very George R. R. Martin-y kind of historical fact that he, I suspect, will not be able to resist picking up on it in some way, shape, or form. So, question from Sylvester Snow saying, "Hello, Robert. I'm curious about your thoughts on Garth Greenhand. Was he the first king buried in the Great Barrow in the north? Was he a green man? He is described in some stories as having green skin and antlers. Do you think the Grey King was his brother? And did the Grey King murder him? Thanks as always for doing this every week. I really do enjoy looking forward to I really do look forward to watching these live streams." So yes, this is Garth Greenhand is a legendary figure from when we talk about the Age of Heroes. Actually, the Dawn Age, even earlier than most of the Age of Heroes characters that we know about. The stories that we have about him are even more outlandish than the kind of things that you might have about Lan the Clever or Bran the Builder, because they are older. They are thousands of years before that, and they do come across as sort of legends. And some say that he was the first of the first men to step across into Westeros. Some say, as you say, some talk about him having literally green skin, having antlers. He seems to have had magical powers to bring life and very much kind of the spirit of the earth, this kind of Herne the Hunter kind of figure that we have. He is very reminiscent of the descriptions that we have of the Green Men, who are the people who are defending and guarding the Isle of Faces. So there's lots of different bits of imagery we've got going on there. He had daughters and he had sons, and they became kings and princesses and all the rest of it. He seems to have been, in almost every sense of the word, sowing his wild oats across Westeros. Almost too big to be true, these stories, but there obviously are some grains of truth in there. Now, just to pick up on a few of the things we've got, some of the things that you're talking about, Sylvester, was he the first king buried in the Great Barrow in the north? This is in Barrowton, which is where Barbary Dustin, House Dustin, are based, and they're in the Barrowlands, ancient burial sites. And the biggest of these is the barrow for the first king, the Great Barrow, and their sort of home is on the top of this. So the question is, could he be the first king? Possibly. I mean, I don't think that. Because the rumors are that he was the person who led the first men across. If we had to pick a person who fits the title of first king, then probably he is the most likely candidate, it has to be said. Do you think, or was he a green man? I personally suspect not. The green men came a bit later. They appear to have been guarding the Isle of Faces after the Pact. The Pact obviously came well after humanity had come into Westeros. Do you think the Grey King, which is this ancient king of the Iron Islands, was his brother, and did the Grey King murder him? Now, this I will refer you on to an excellent essay, or possibly series of essays, done by Amanda Disputed Lands, Crowfood's daughter. She goes by a number of different names, but if you search, I think she's done them under Crowfood's daughter. If you search for them, you'll find them on various fora, Song of Ice and Fire fora, exploring these issues about Garth Greenhand, who, the Green King and the Grey King. Now, the first king, on his barrow, we're told in the World of Ice and Fire, says, a curse was placed on the Great Barrow that would allow no living man to rival the first king. This curse made these in their appearance as it sucked away their vitality and life. all of his life and vitality was sucked out of him, and he was just this sort of grey, corpse-like figure who apparently reigned for 1,000 years. So could he have been challenging the first king? It's possible. These things are all legends. I would highly recommend you go and check out Amanda's essay on the subject. It explains it in a lot more detail and a lot more convincingly than I suspect I could. For me, we always have to come around to the fact that these are legends. We're not going to be told by George R. R. Martin the truth of this, and it's that whether these things are true or not is not going to have an impact on the story of A Song of Ice and Fire, which sounds, sort of like brushing it away. I find it absolutely fascinating, but this is not central to the story we're being told right now. Eric Fogg saying, what's your theory as to Harlan Tyrell's disappearing army in Dawn? So Harlan Tyrell was the Tyrell who was made the Lord of the Reach, the Lord Protector of the Reach, after the Targaryen invasion. So the Gardeners had died out, and the Targaryens made the Tyrells in charge. Harlan then joined in with this fight that continued after the invasion between the Targaryens and Dawn, because Dawn refused to surrender. And the Targaryens just went through this wave after wave of trying to make them surrender. They sent in the dragons, they sent in armies, and again the same sort of things happened, was that they would attack, and then the Dornish would just sort of disappear into the desert, into the mountains. And eventually, when the armies from the Seven Kingdoms sort of moved back, then the Dornish would reappear and carry on as they were. It was pretty. It was repeated several times. And the other thing that happened was that Harlan Tyrell went in with an army, and he went into the desert and was never seen from again. Now, personally, I'm the kind of person that wants to do Occam's razor on this. I don't have a specific theory other than if you march an army into the desert that's not used to desert warfare, and it's many weeks across, and you have got hostile armies who are used to desert warfare, who wish you to die, then if your army disappears, that's probably just because you've been killed, or the elements have killed you. So I think it's as simple as that. He marched his army into the desert, and they all died. Not perhaps as exciting or sexy as some theories, but I think it's by a long way the thing that is most likely, and the thing that George R. R. Martin hints was happening. Lee Roberts. Hi, Robert. Can you talk a little about House Peak? To me, they feel like one of those houses that you just have to dislike, like House Bolton or the Freys. Okay, so first of all, I'll talk a little bit about House Peak, because they're not hugely famous in terms of they weren't on the TV show, and they don't seem to have a huge amount of impact in the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. But if you go back through history, they have been a very important and influential house. Now, they claimed to come all the way from Garth Greenhands. That's where they got their ancestry from. I think that they married one of Garth Greenhand's daughters, and that's where the family came from. They had famously a falling out with the Manderleys, who at the time were in the Reach, and they were a powerful family. And this came from the fact that the Lord gardener at the time had only daughters rather than sons, and both the Manderleys and the Peaks decided that they wanted to have their son married into the family and then become the heir. So they got each married one of the daughters, and basically just kept on fighting each other for the right to be taking over the Reach. Eventually, the Tyrells rallied the other houses together and just put down both houses and just sort of put them into their place. But the Peaks convinced the powers that be in the Reach, the gardeners, to basically get rid of the Manderleys. So that is why the Manderleys were looking for a new home, why they ended up in White Harbour with House Stark. They were chucked out of their ancient historical home and sent all the way up to the north, where they found a new home. Then, sort of moving it slightly further forward, towards the end of the Dance of the Dragons, Unwin Peak suddenly gets to be very important. He becomes Hand of the King, and he basically launches a little mini coup attempt trying to marry his family into the ruling Targaryen family. Doesn't work. Now, the thing I would... also, a couple of other things. They came out in favor of the Blackfires, and they used to have 3 castles and they had 2 of them confiscated because of that. They also had a rebellion of their own called the Peak Rebellion, which happened relatively recently in Westerosi history. And during that, then King Maekar was killed, and that death was what sparked the Great Council that ended up with Aegon becoming Aegon V. So it's what was a small rebellion turned into actually an incredibly pivotal moment in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. What I would say, though, which is fascinating, is that we know that George R. R. Martin does like doing literary nods to some of his favourite writers. House Peak is probably one of the biggest examples of this. George R. R. Martin was a fan of Mervyn Peake, who, and quite rightly too, excellent series, the Gormenghast series. Now, the house, it appears to be named after Mervyn Peake, and one of their prominent members is a guy called Titus Peake, who seems to be named after Titus Groan, the main character in Gormenghast. The house or the castle that they have is called Starpike, and Gormenghast Steerpike. The links are there. They also, the family, the Groan family, used to have 3 castles. Now they've only got 1. They are largely echoed across from that. Now, that I find fascinating. It's just the way that George R. R. Martin likes to do these little nods. But so the question is this a house that we're supposed to dislike? I think we're not supposed to hate them in the way that, like the Freys, it seems it's very hard to like the Freys. But there are some houses like the Boltons who've got these horrific flaying practices and all the rest of it. The House Peak seems just to be opportunistic and ambitious in my mind. That makes them very similar to a lot of other houses across Westeros. So I don't think we're supposed to particularly dislike them. They don't seem to have any particularly horrible habits, but at the same time, yeah, they're not. They're always out for their own interests and always trying to marry into the ruling family and things like that. We're not supposed to like them, I don't think. But also, I don't think we're supposed to hate them. Okay, so Cyclops is better than Wolverine. Thank you for the super chat saying, how powerful is House Hightower numbers-wise? This is, well, it's hard to say. I mean, in terms of numbers, so Old Town, well, actually, I'll take a step back from this. The High Towers are the most influential house that are, I would argue, in the Seven Kingdoms, that are not one of the Lords Paramount, that are not one of the highest level houses. And that power is not just from strength of arms. They have got an army. I think I remember at one point they had 9,000 troops, but this isn't about, and they have a navy, but this isn't about their strength in arms. That's not where their real power comes from. They are strong in terms of their army, but not hugely strong compared to other houses. Their power comes from the fact that they host and bankroll the Citadel, and until very recently, the home of the Faith of the Seven. That was where they got their influence, because if you think about where does power reside across Westeros, well, yes, obviously in the ruling families themselves, but the Maesters are in charge of the communications network. They're in charge of educating every single highborn child across the country. They always have a seat on the council. Similarly, the Faith of the Seven, they have somebody not just in every main city or castle, but also in every single village as the hub of the village life, rural life. So if you want to have access to influencing the population as a whole, as well as the top 1%, then you have that in those two organizations. And the sponsors and hosts of both of those organizations are House Hightower. So that is where their power lies. They have got a certain amount of troops and a reasonable sized navy, but they're by no means top of the pile. Their power is in other areas. Question from in fact, not a question, saying, and now for the weather. And now the weather. Thank you so much for Super Chat, saying just a little thank you for all the great entertainment. You're very welcome indeed. Andrew K just picking up a question from Lone Wolf, saying, who are the friends in the reach of Illyrio Mapatis? I think it is the Hightowers, and the Tyrells are going to be wiped out. So Illyrio talks about having friends in the reach. Now, the implication is that these are people who might be supportive of the Blackfire Rebellion, perhaps. The friends in the reach almost certainly aren't the Tyrells. That doesn't seem to be the case, although the Tyrells, I suspect, will come out to support Fagon when he arrives and starts moving on King's Landing. So who could it be? The Hightowers are a possibility, but the thing about the Hightowers is that they have survived so long by being, by most of the time, the Dance of the Dragons is the big time when they kind of overstepped their mark, to be honest. Most of the rest of the time, they've just stayed down where they are and just gone with the wind of what it is. The Andals are coming. Okay, well, we'll welcome the Andals in and we'll say, why don't you build the base of your religion here? The Targaryens are coming. Okay, well, we'll fling open the gates to them and we'll say, why don't, we'll crown you king here. This is what they did, was that they just saw where the political breeze was blowing and went with it, rather than having specific loyalties to any particular overlord at any point. So that is where they're at. So for them, the Hightowers to be friends in the reach, I suspect might not be just I don't think that they're particularly aligned to Illyrio in any way. So what we're probably looking at are some smaller houses like House Peak, as we've already said, who were very much a matter of they were supportive of the Blackfire Rebellion, and there are, in fact, I think maybe even 3 members of House Peak who are currently in the Golden Company. So there are a lot of houses that potentially are loyal still to the Blackfire cause, and I think that's what it is, rather than a specific one big house. And yeah, Andrew Kay saying the dance was the most outward action, and it basically backfired on them. So definitely back to their power from the shadows approach. Exactly, this is what they've been doing all this time. Power from the shadows. They have huge amounts of power and influence across Westeros, but they're happy for that not to be overt. And the fact that they are not Lords Paramount of the Reach is probably the biggest and most obvious example of this. They don't need to be there at the high table. They don't need to be the people who are seen as being the most powerful, because they are more powerful than the Tyrells. They just don't need to be shouting about it. Thank you so much to Mr. Douglas Myers. Thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate that one. It's a dancing lemon, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, but thank you. I appreciate that. And also Brendan, thank you so much as well for the super sticker. Alana saying, good evening, Robert. The Swan Sword, we get a truly wonderful character in Rohan Webber, Lady of Coldmoat in the Reach. She will later on become the Lady of Casterly Rock and grandmother to Tywin and the rest. Do you think we'll see her again if George R.R. Martin can get round to writing more Duncan Egg novels? And do you have any theories on how she might have disappeared under mysterious circumstances? It seems like it wouldn't be mentioned unless it were important in some way. Yes, so we get Lady Rohan Webber does appear in The Swan Sword, and she also gets a mention in The World of Ice and Fire with this very teasery mention that she did indeed marry into the Lannisters. That was, I think, her 6th husband, perhaps. She has 4 children. After the birth of the 4th, shortly afterwards, she disappeared in mysterious circumstances. And then The World of Ice and Fire goes on to talk about something completely different. What does that mean? I think it is purely and simply that George R.R. Martin is he's queuing up something for a later story for Duncan Egg. He's talked about the fact that the Duncan Egg stories will go all the way through the life of Duncan Egg, and so I think that he's probably got a germ of an idea that he just wanted to name check and build up. He does this quite a lot. We'll see it in Fire and Blood in particular, I'm sure. When we get to the Winds of Winter, a lot of things he's been teeing up in Fire and Blood, we will see, oh yeah, he was trying to prepare us for that. This, I think, he was trying to prepare us for what's going to be happening later on. I think that they will meet again. I think that Dunk will come round. He's basically said that A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms means, yes, we're going to see Dunk and Egg in all of the different bits of the Seven Kingdoms. They're going to, they've been in the Reach already. They've been all over the place. We know that they're going to go up to Winterfell in the north the next time round, and yes, we are going to see them come to the Westlands. So I think that we will see Duncan Egg probably at Casterly Rock in a later story, if we ever get that. I mean, that's many years away. The Greasy Strangler saying, hi Robert, I hope you are keeping well. Thank you, I am. My question is around whether you think Cersei will blow up the Sept in the books, and if so, what differences will there be? In the show, everyone just seems to just forget about it a few episodes later. Surely in the books, there will be harsher consequences and the retribution from all the followers of the Seven across Westeros. Yeah, I've covered this one a little bit earlier, so I'm not going to, I hope you forgive me for not covering over the same ground on this one. What I will say is that yes, there will be retribution afterwards, and this is the key difference that we're going to be having between the books and the show on this one. I think it's like, I mean, I wouldn't like to put an exact percentage on it, but I think it's more likely than not that is how she is going to try and achieve her aims, is by blowing up the Great Sept. And this will make enemies of the Tyrells. It will make enemies of the Faith of the Seven and the people of King's Landing. I think this is going to drive her into the arms of Cersei, and I think it's going to drive her out of King's Landing. So it's going to be, whereas on the show they seem to treat it as just a sort of a cool thing that she did to get rid of some rivals. This is going to be actually quite an important point, because it's going to be the moment that they were doing okay. Actually, it wasn't great with the Lannisters and the Tyrells. It was quite an uneasy peace, but as Varys pointed out when he assassinated Kevin Lannister, they were actually starting to do all right. And this is going to be the big turning point, is that Cersei's going to do something which suddenly turns everyone against her. Da Crow, thank you so much for the super sticker. And that one, I stare at these trying to work. I'm going to say that is a flying pear. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Brendan saying, what is a topic about the Reach that you would like to share with us? Well, I think actually, I mean, thank you very much. I've been covering the ones that that I've been answering, the kinds of questions that I am personally fascinated by. I think the bit that I'm excited by, which I'm working through at the moment, is this interaction of all of these different elements for the story. The fact that I think we might see the Tarleys heading back into the Reach at the same time as we see Euron trying to destroy a lot of the Reach. And let's not forget, his aim is not just this kind of I wish to invade and take over and have people being subjugated. He's happy to destroy the entire world. That's what he's about, and he is about to create carnage. And that, I think, I mean, I touched on this a moment ago, so perhaps this is a new angle that I'll go down. One thing which George R. R. Martin is constantly wanting to show us is the impact on the small folk. Now, if you have got the part of the Seven Kingdoms which is the most populous, which is probably I mean, as I say, with the exception of the gold-rich Westerlands, the richest and most cosmopolitan and most carefree part of the Seven Kingdoms, if suddenly they find themselves being hit by apocalyptic attacks off the south coast, by a war between maybe the Tarleys coming back in, by Cersei arriving, what is going to happen? There is going to be a mass movement of people. People will be scrabbling to get out of the Reach, because suddenly they might have been thinking, all these wars are happening elsewhere. This is no longer the solution. Being in the Reach is very dangerous, and you would get a mass movement of population. And I think this is something George R. R. Martin will not overlook, is that we're suddenly going to see huge amounts of people heading inland and deciding where to go. Do they go to the Riverlands? Are they going to head off towards King's Landing? Wherever it is they're going, they're suddenly going to get an influx of new people at a time when there is already famine and potentially, as we've already talked about, a plague. AK Channel TV saying, why didn't Tywin try to control the Reach's resources? I mean, I think Tywin played a very long game, and having resources was not all that he was about. He already had money. He didn't need the extra money. That wasn't his priority. What his priority was, after he'd secured the Lannisters as being the preeminent house in the Westerlands, his priority then was to get, not just like take over some neighboring areas. He wanted the throne, and he wanted power. He became Hand of the King. He tried to marry his daughter to the crown prince. That was his aim, not just like taking over a few neighbors. He went straight for the heart of power. Joe Hagar saying it was out of Tywin's reach. Very good. Lone Wolf saying, in a time of war, food is more important than gold. Bronze said that before the Siege of King's Landing, and he is right. Yes, absolutely. There will be huge problems with food supplies, particularly if Euron is burning, as he may well do, a lot of the Reach. Evelyn Duncan saying, do you think Garland and Willis Tyrell will die at the end of the books, and if so, how? Yeah, I spoke a little bit about this. I think probably they will. They're not central characters, so George R. Martin could take them wherever he wants to, but I think there's a fair chance that they will. I think Highgarden will fall to the combined might of Euron and Cersei, and it's not just going to be Elena Tyrell there. I think Willis Tyrell is going to be there, so I think he will die. Garland, I don't know. I've probably got better hopes for him than the rest. He seems a genuinely decent guy, which probably means that George R. R. Martin's going to kill him off. But it wouldn't surprise me if he sees the righteousness of the battle against the others and joins up there. That's the kind of thing that he seems to be. He doesn't care about whether people know who he is or that whether he gets any glory. He seems to be the kind of person who's just going to get on the right side of things and do it. So I have more hope for Garland than I do Willis Tyrell. But yeah, he seems like a reasonable guy. So yeah, maybe not. Eric Fergs says, since the Tyrells are on the verge of possible extinction, what were their actual mistakes that led to this position? They always seem to back the correct horse. Renly would have won if not for Mel's shadow assassin. Connecting with the Lannisters was the right move, but Cersei was too insecure to have a partner. Yes, so I don't think they've made any particular wrong moves. And at the point we're at with the books, then actually they're pretty strong. They're okay in the Reach. Euron has not yet launched any attacks on the mainland. He's just taken the Shield Islands really and done a few raids. So they're still fine over there in the Reach. Cersei's attempt to frame Marjorie seems not to be believed by most people, so that doesn't seem to be too much of a problem. She's playing some games with who Marjorie might be able to have as a champion, but that doesn't, even if that went wrong, then what, they've only lost the one person. They've managed to get Elena Tyrell out. Garland's headed out. They've not made huge strategic errors thus far. What is going to get them into trouble is when you get Varys having framed them. That will lead Cersei to do a preemptive strike on them, and that is going to then be the problem. And it's going to be Euron and Cersei who are unpredictable, and the kinds of people who do stuff that perhaps Elena Tyrell is not really used to. She's much more used to people who she can understand and predict in some way, but Cersei and Euron, no, not so much. Jazz Singh saying, hi Robert, hope all is well with you and yours, and thanks for keeping up with the excellent content. You're very welcome, thank you. My question is about the Hightowers and their noticeable absence in the current story. What has Lord Leighton been up to for the past decade, and will he or other members of his family play a prominent role in the wars to come? So Leighton Hightower is Lord Hightower. He has not been seen for 10 years. He's still alive. Everyone knows that he's still alive, and he's apparently at the top of the Hightower reading magical texts. with his magical daughter. So the people are saying, well, what is he there for? He seems to have delegated most of the work of defending Old Town to his sons. He sent them off to be getting some extra cell sales. He sent them to be improving the physical defenses and things like that. So he does seem to be keeping an eye on what's going on. What is he doing? I think he is seeing stuff. This is the imagery we get from the high towers, that it's such a high height that you can see what's going on around. So he perhaps is doing communicating with people. If anyone's got a glass candle around there, there's a good chance we know there's at least 4 in Old Town. Why he can't have one, I suspect he probably has. So I think that we probably won't find exactly what he's doing. I don't think he's got a project that he's been up to for the last 10 years. But when we do get the Battle of Old Town, as I suspect we will get, what we're going to see is that he has set up magical defenses, not just the physical defenses he's been sending his sons out to be doing. He is setting up magical defenses. And so we will see when Euron attacks, imagine this, if you will, Euron coming in with a dragon over Old Town, and then magical attacks on that dragon from the high tower. And we see this from the perspective probably of Sam, who is just looking up at what is going on above him. That, I think, is not just something that would be really cool, but I think that is actually reasonably likely. It can't be 100% on this one, but it's reasonably likely that that's what's going on. Lord Hightower is aware of the threat. He is magical. He is coming up with magical defenses. Eric, Jewel Elson, thank you so much for the super sticker. They are hippos I'm going with. Excellent. I like that one. Eric Ferg saying, regarding the upcoming House of the Dragon series, will Otto and Alicent be portrayed as villains? Their actions led to the dance. I have a hard time coming up with sympathetic angles for their behavior. Yes. I don't know whether they will be portrayed as villains. I don't think that's the way they're going to play this. I might be wrong. I think having Rhys of Fans as Otto Hightower, he's as an actor, he has a vulnerability to him, and I think that we will see that, and I don't think that we're going to hate him. I think that we will see that he has got a personal grudge against Daemon Targaryen that is a lot more important to the start of the war or the reason for going to war than you might otherwise think. Now, for those, I might even get it out tomorrow, who knows. I've just done a video doing an overview of the Dance of the Dragons, which if you just want to I think it's like something like 12, 13 minutes long. You don't want to have to read all the way through Fire and Blood, but you just want to, what are the headlines? What happened? Who were the two sides? Who won? And what was the main bit? What were the main bits of action? Then I've got a video which I'm hoping to get out for tomorrow, but it might be early next week. But anyway, the start of it was the fact we get two factions who have two different people that they want to become the monarch. Now, to our ears, then George R. R. Martin, I think, is very clearly in line with what you're saying, to our modern eyes, in fact, because we get Rhaenyra, who is announced as being the heir. But while the old king is alive, while Viserys is alive, he announces who he wants to succeed him. And that person, you would have thought, should be therefore taking over after him. But the Hightowers use the technical reason that, established a couple of kings ago by the Great Council of Jaehaerys, that there is male preference primogeniture meant that the king didn't get to decide who succeeded. This should be done by following the line down through the male heirs, which meant that Alicent's son should be taking over. So it will be hard, I think, to present that on screen as anything other than a bunch of people not wanting a woman to be the ruler. But I think what we will see is that behind that, there are layers of tensions between the groups that are some of which may well be justified. Now, one of them will be personal grievances. Another one are actually those people over there may well not be legitimate children, therefore why on earth should they be in line to the throne? There are lots of layers to this that might make you think, okay, the Hightowers have got more of a point. And I suspect what they're going to be doing on the show is not to create a good side and a bad side, one lot that we support, one lot that we hate. I suspect what they'll do on the show is try and show two very flawed sides who both have legitimate claims in some way. That said, yes, the Hightowers did indeed spark the Civil War. They were the cause of it. I don't think there's any getting around that. There was a named heir, and they decided to ignore the old king's specific instructions. So yes, that's the situation, but I suspect on the TV show they will try and make it a lot more even-handed. Maester Mansa saying, I have a few questions about the Hightower and House Hightower. You're saying you often include the Hightower as a fourth possible location of importance to the children. Is there anything beyond it being an island and it having black stone that hints at its importance? No, so this is why when I never try and call this a theory, more of an observation, that the Isla Faces is an island. Dragonstone, which is where the Dragonglass mine is an island, and Starfall, which is where the Sword Dawn, which quite possibly is the legendary Lightbringer, is an island. And that, I think, is too much to be a coincidence. I sometimes add in the Hightower because of its geographical similarity. We haven't yet been given a specific reason why this might be important to the children. There are historical echoes there. This appears to have been a trading post originally, presumably between humans and children of the forest. Yes, there's the fused black stone there. It's called Battle Isle. We don't know what battle was there. That's a mystery. There are a few echoes that we have, like this line that you can see the wall from the top of the high tower, which kind of creates a connection that is also underlined by the idea that the wall was Bran the Builder built and the high tower was Bran the Builder built. So there are echoes across, but there is not a specific thing that we can point and say, yes, that is clearly a thing that the children of the forest would want. So that's why I don't tend to include it in my initial observation, but say that this is a possible fourth, that because there are allusions but nothing yet that we've seen. Then saying you often hypothesize that Euron will destroy the Citadel and Library. What about the High Tower? If he does burn the High Tower, could that end House Hightower? They often retreat there after all. So in terms of, will this be the end of House Hightower? My guess is purely on a numbers basis, no. Last time I counted, Leighton Hightower had 4 wives and 10 children. I think that there's a good chance that at least a Hightower will survive this. So, no, I don't think that the House Hightower is at risk. The Hightower itself, it's one of those things that it would announce Euron to the world. The High Tower has fallen. Euron has destroyed the High Tower. This is the kind of thing that would mean Euron turns from being just another, in the eyes of the people of Westeros, he turns from being just another lord of the Iron Islands who raids the coast every now and then to actually he's achieved something. He has destroyed something which has stood for millennia. So symbolically, it will be really huge. The burning of the library seems to be the most obvious thing that's there. The High Tower is built from stone, so that can't be burned. Could he have it bashed down somehow? It's possible. I don't know. But I think the symbolism of it falling is more important than anything else. So I can certainly see it happening. And in fact, when I was talking about, we see this from Sam's eyes, which we probably will. The only other option is Aaron Greyjoy, if he's still around at that point. They're the two POV characters we have around that part of the world. But for Sam to be escaping Old Town and look over his shoulder and see the High Tower falling would be, again, quite an epic moment. Chris Meggia saying, can glass candles see everything like weirwoods? We're not told huge amounts about them. We just get these kind of like vague statements, able to see and communicate over great distances. The weirwoods, the important thing about seeing through the weirwoods is that time is not the issue. So it's you moving through the fourth dimension is not an issue. With the glass candles, we've had no hint that you can do that with them. So they seem to be different things that achieve different elements. The glass candles appear to be sort of an equivalent of the sort of the Lord of the Rings Palantiri, those sort of the glass balls that Saruman and people had, that you could sort of communicate and see off what's happening across the way. So you can see, so Marwyn seemed to use it to be tracking Sam's movements in the boat coming down to Old Town. So you don't need to have something at either end as long as you know what you're about. And this might be a more rational answer to the you can see the wall from the top of the High Tower if they've got a glass cannon. Oldman Robbo, thank you for the super chat, saying there's a lot of strong female characters in The Reach. Is George R. R. Martin saying behind every great man is a great woman, or is The Reach a lot like Dawn when it comes to equality, including succession? I mean, I don't think he's saying behind every great man is a great woman. That's not really the point that he tries to make. In fact, in Fire and Blood, I think the point he's trying to make is that there are great women as well as great men. It's just that the history is written by men and they tend to ignore the women or cast them in bad light. That seems to be the point he seems to be making through Fire and Blood. We get the queen who never was, the queen who did sit on the Iron Throne for 6 months, but inexplicably seems to be left out of all of the list of rulers of Westeros. We get Princess Arya, who was twice the heir, never queen. We get Alicent, who sort of co-ruled. We get the three Targaryens, who the initial three Targaryens who came across, who Aegon was only sitting on the Iron Throne for a few months a year. The rest of the time, the other two were. There are countless examples of women ruling Westeros just before the Targaryens, and it not being mentioned at all in the history books because the Maesters have not recorded it. That seems to be the point he's trying to make. But in terms of whether the Reach is a bit like Dawn. So Dawn has different succession laws, that it's not male preference primogeniture, it's just that the oldest child inherits regardless of their gender. The Reach doesn't have that. Dawn has been sort of self-contained as a different culture for a very long time, whereas the Reach, as part of the Seven Kingdoms and before the Seven Kingdoms, there were a lot more sort of permeable borders, but with the rest of Westeros. So no is the short answer. They don't have that. I think George R. R. Martin, his view is that there are strong women across the piece, and this isn't just the Reach. Yes, you get Elena Tyrell, and yes, you get Rohan Weber and all the rest of it, but you can find that in every single part of the Seven Kingdoms, I think, is the point that he's trying to make. A question from Jason, and I'll pick up Mara Lee. I said I'll pick up your question a bit later, as it was linked to somebody else's. So Jason says, "Hi Robert, what do you think will happen in Old Town with Euron? He is obviously trying to cause something big and magical, but are there any clues or hints as to what might happen or what the aftermath will be?" And Mara says, "Euron is preparing to sail against the Red Wine Fleet and the ships of House Hightower. Do you see any other houses getting involved to try to defeat Euron, or will the other houses be too busy trying to deal with their own problems, such as Vaegon's invasion?" Okay, so in terms of what happens with the Old Town, Euron, and the like, this is how I see it. Euron is setting up for early on in the Winds of Winter. Euron is setting up a big battle, a big sea battle. It's his fleet against the Red Wine Fleet, Imperial Fleet, the Hightowers. He is trying to get it so that it happens at the same time as the battle happening over in Slaver's Bay. He is strapping to the front of all of his ships. He's been apparently collecting magic users. He's got the warlocks. He's been collecting priests of different religions. And he's got his own lover who is pregnant with his child. And as he is a king, that is then king's blood, strapping that to the front of his ship. What the idea seems to be is to create this battle that will have lots of deaths, and every ship is going to have a magic user of some kind calling out to their god, using whatever magical abilities they have. The Dragonbinder horn will be blown over the far side of the world, over in Essos. Here, the blood in the water is going to be attracting krakens. There's going to be just this massive maelstrom of magic happening. And this is what Euron is. It's not this carefully worked out plan. He just wants to create huge amounts of chaos and destruction. And that is what he's going to do. That will I suspect lead to a victory for Euron in some way, but he will not immediately follow it up by attacking Old Town, I think. We need to have that period where Sam does some things in Old Town, researches. We need to see what Jack and Hagar's up to. We need to find out what on earth's going on with Sorella. We need all of this. And the hints are that he's sent spies in there already. He is probably trying to find things. Euron, he's many things, but he is clever. He will probably try and create extra magic from Old Town, and he claims that he went to the Old Valyria, the Smoking Sea, like he captured magical artifacts from the warlocks. He will see Old Town as a way to collect magical artifacts and get even more magic. Just on a random aside, Old Town has a store of Valyrian steel. We know this. It has it forges them into the rings that if you study magical arts, you can have a Valyrian steel ring. So he could use that to forge himself. He appears to already have Valyrian steel suit of armor. Could he even forge himself a Valyrian steel sword? I don't know, pure speculation, but that there is Valyrian steel there, and people who know how to use it. And there is a font of knowledge that is magical, that is hidden beneath the citadel. He will want to get access to that. He won't want to immediately burn this down. So we're going to have this period of time when he is trying to get the things that he wants before he then causes the destruction. Once he's got what he wants, the moment he's got what he wants, I think then we're going to see this massive attack on Old Town. We're going to see this huge defenses from House Hightower. I think a dragon will come in. The library, the echo of the Library of Alexandria, obviously it has to burn, I think. And if you have a dragon, that's the way it's going to burn in a fantasy world. George R. R. Martin takes inspiration from the real world and then just takes it up a few notches for his fantasy world. We are going to see what started out as a story at the beginning of Game of Thrones as being relatively low fantasy, with the wise people that we meet scoffing at the ideas of magic. By this point in the story, we're going to be very high fantasy. We're going to have dragons and krakens. We're going to have magical, I don't know, fireballs. Who knows what it is that Leighton Hightower's got going on from the top of the high tower? But magical defenses happen. And the Old Town is going to be burned. After that, I think we are going to see Euron then come to an agreement with Cersei. Cersei is going to be looking for allies because she's run out of allies, and she is going to be hounded by the Faith of the Seven. Euron has just been burning the home base of the Faith of the Seven, the other home base, the Starry Sept. He is going to be a natural ally for her. So that, I think, is what is going to be happening there. Mara was asking if other houses are going to get involved. Well, the Tyrells will definitely be wanting to get involved. They will want to be defending the shores of the Reach, and they will be lending forces. Perhaps Garland, this is where Garland will get involved. He will come down to try and help defend against any invasions being launched by Euron. Question from J. Kevin saying, sorry, non-reach question. Love your stuff, by the way. Watch it while I clean my apartment. I love to hearing what people do when they listen to this. Thoughts on a hidden identity for Tatter's Blackfire? When it comes to the Westlands and Reach, what do you think will be the results with Plum? Okay, so the Westlands, I think this is the Tyrion, when he's over, this is outside Meereen, in order to effectively buy his way into the Second Sons, he does a whole series of promissory notes, the biggest being to Ben Plum, who's the leader. And he says, when I am Lord of Castle Rock, you can have all these things, including he offers him a castle, lots of money. What will be the outcome of all of that? Well, I think Tyrion will become the Lord of Castle Rock. I think that we will see the Second Sons heading across in support of Dany. I think that they will get their rewards, but I think that this will, if not bankrupt House Lannister, I think that this will be a matter of suddenly House Lannister are no longer the richest house in the land. So I think that is just going to go according to plan. The irony, of course, would be if, as on the show, they had literally run out of money. There's no hint that that's the case. There's no hint that the mines have run dry. In fact, George R. R. Martin has specifically said on a couple of different occasions that the mines have not run dry. So the money is still there. I think that it will be paid, and I think that Tyrion will regret it, because he will become the Lord, and then actually he won't have all the riches that he perhaps felt that he would be able to. The Crow, thank you so much. This is another. This is a hippo in a collapsing chair. That super sticker. Thank you very much for that. Vertigid99, you know who you are. Apologies for mispronouncing your name there. Hello there again. Thank you for your great content. You're very welcome. I was wondering what you can tell us about House Florent. Jamie said that every house has an unruly bannerman, the Florents in the Reach. Yeah, I've not done my research on House Florent recently, so I can't tell you all the details of them. I will happily do that at the beginning of my next live stream. But yeah, the Reach has a number of house unruly bannermen. House Florent are indeed one of them, or have historically been one of them. But also you had House Peak that I was talking about a bit earlier. So what I will do is I will plead the fifth rather than give you half information. I will give you my full thoughts on House Florent at the beginning of the next live stream, if that works for you. Okay, let's go to, I've got 3 or 4 more questions from my patrons. The Late Escapist. Have you noticed that the scions of almost all the top houses in Westeros are currently crippled or infirmed? For example, Willis Tyrell, as well as Bran Stark, Theon Greyjoy, Doran Martell, Shireen Baratheon, Jaime and Tyrion Lannister, Robert Arryn. All of the aforementioned are the current ruler or next in the traditional line of succession to rule their respective houses, and all suffer some ailment or birth defect that prevents them from being great fighters, or in some cases even ambulatory. I think this is George R. R. Martin's way of showing us how the current paradigm of martial leadership is flawed and destined to be supplanted by a new paradigm of intellectual leadership, an era of philosopher kings, if you will. Well, I think it's a fantastic observation that, yes, a lot of the rulers of the main houses, or the heirs to the main houses, are not this traditional sort of fighter. Now, I don't think that all of them will survive. Shireen, for example, I'm pretty sure definitely won't. Theon, I have my doubts whether he will survive. So I think that this isn't trying to show what the next generation is going to be like, but it is part of this cripples, bastards, and broken men idea that George R. R. Martin plays with a lot. He sees people as being the people. I should start again. Broken men or broken people are the ones who have our sympathy in this story, and they will inherit the earth in some fashion, I feel sure. Now, that most often he's highlighting people who get broken by the war, and that's what when we're talking about broken men, that is what we're most often talking about, people who've been broken by the war, people like Theon, people like Sandor Clegane. These are the broken men, but there are people who have been born with some physical disabilities, are all over the place in Westeros. And this part of it is just, that's what medieval world was like. Medicine wasn't perfect, therefore you get a huge amount of people who were born with things that with modern medicine might be treatable, or at least identifiable. But yes, George R. R. Martin is definitely showing us that there are different types of leadership, and perhaps the strong leader type, the Tywin Lannister, the Robert Baratheon, even the Ned Stark, they were there at the beginning of the story. We will definitely see those people being edged out. They've all obviously been edged out already, but they will be edged out in favor of a more thoughtful approach to leadership, or often a more female leadership cadre. And I don't think this is him saying the world is going to look a lot more wonderful and with philosopher kings in the future, but I think it is him showing what the result of what we might now call toxic masculinity might be. That the Randall Tarleys of this world, the Tywin Lannisters of this world, have an impact on their children, and it's that we often see. Sasek, I noticed, so Will Garland is trying to take the House Florence Castle because they supported Stannis because of Selyse. Yes, that's absolutely true. Question from Kendra Summers saying, completely forgot today was Thursday. So many thoughts on the Reach, but no time to put much thought into them. The High Towers were so significant throughout Fire and Blood. Do you foresee them having a large impact to the end of the story? Also, will Marjorie make it out of King's Landing alive, or will she be forever destined as a pawn? As for Marjorie, no, I think she's going to die, unfortunately. I don't think I would call her a pawn, but yeah, I think that Cersei has it in for her too much. The High Towers, it's worth... There was a throwaway comment in Fire and Blood, which I mentioned a few times, from the Lannisters. I can't remember which Lannister it was, but talked about wanting the Lannisters to be at the high table with the most powerful houses in Westeros, and the most powerful houses in Westeros were named as the Targaryens, the Baratheons, the Velaryons, and the Hightowers. Now, that wasn't what came across, certainly on the TV show. We didn't really see the Velaryons or the Hightowers, but I think that goes to show quite how powerful and influential people who are in that top 1% realize that quite how powerful and influential the Hightowers are. Will they have an impact to the end of this story? I think they have to have an impact, because you can't have this hugely important family that doesn't have an impact at all. But their impact is going to be reactive rather than proactive. So I think that we're going to see them, rather than the Tyrells, I think we're going to see the Hightowers be the people who are there holding out against Euron in the southwest. The Tyrells will be, but the real important players will be the Hightowers. Last question from my patron, so now's a good time to drop any other questions into the chat. C. Gagiola saying, what do you think will become of Alleras Sorella? They are very intriguing with a super interesting skill set, and I would love to see them survive a while. Yes, so this is one of the gang that Sam has run into. Now, we get Sorella Sand is one of the Sand Snakes, and she has sort of disappeared from dawn, off doing her own thing, it would appear. Meanwhile, in Old Town, Alleras, who appears to be very clever and is learning a huge amounts, and is there with Marwyn the Mage. Now, Alleras is Sorella spelt backwards, and appears I don't know if George R. R. Martin uses this exact word, but relatively androgynous in appearance. So although presenting male, could well be female. So first of all, this is how does a woman learn? What do they want to learn when women aren't allowed into the Citadel? You have to pretend to be a man. This is, I wouldn't call it a trope, but this is the kind of thing I would be shocked if George R. R. Martin didn't use this somewhere, because this happened all the time in these institutions that were kept from women. So that in and of itself, that is why she's there. And she is the daughter of Oberyn Martell, who did it himself. He obviously didn't change his presenting gender, but he did. He learned, I think he got 6 chains, 6 links in his chain in Old Town. He went and he studied, and he became very practiced and excellent at poisons, which incidentally leads into the theory that he poisoned Tywin Lannister. And so it makes sense that one of his children would wish to follow in his footsteps. So I think it's beyond doubt that this is Sorella Sand. I think that she is probably just there learning stuff in and of herself. The intriguing thing is this idea of the Sphinx, the Sphinx, the riddle is the Sphinx. And I think that what we're just going to see is Sam, I mean, maybe there are more layers to this, but Sam working out who she is over the course of the next few chapters. And it probably is going to be a matter of, yes, Sam is trying to find things out for himself, but we're actually going to have a bit of a detective time with Sam in Old Town. While all this stuff is going on around him, he's going to be working out who is this Alleras, what's going on there, and also what's going on with Pate. And I think that we're going to see Sam doing a whole load of detective work. Also, the Marwyn the Mage left him with some cryptic comments about the Maesters having killed the dragons last time. I think we're going to see Sam just discovering huge amounts about what's going on. Okay, question from John Martin. In fact, not a question. John Martin, thank you so much just for the super chat, saying thanks for the great content, Robert. You're very welcome. I'll just try and pick up a few questions in the chat. Greek Weirwood saying many times poison is seen as a woman's weapon. Yes, we're told this many times. I think that this is again, this is George R. R. Martin showing us how it's seen as sort of cowardly, and the people living in his world often have very kind of biased perspectives about women. Barus Aurelius saying the Martells and the Sand Snakes are much more interesting and dynamic in the books, but it seems that they will end up just as insignificant as they did on the show. I don't think that's really the case. So the Martells will, through Arianne, are going to be the biggest supporters of Aegon. So they are going to link up. This has been Doran Martell's cunning plan all the way through history. It's the cunning plan seems, I shall marry my family to the Targaryens, and he tries it again and again and again. Eventually, what's going to happen is that we know Sir Barristan's going to send Quentyn Martell's bones back to Dorne and basically say, well, Daenerys has gone missing, but before she did, she refused the marriage offer. Oh, and by the way, Quentyn's now dead. That is going to turn Doran Martell against Daenerys. But hey, he's got another Targaryen who's just arrived on his doorstep, and Arianne is going to meet him, and I think that he will throw in his lot. Dorne are going to come in behind Aegon. So that, I think, is the main thing that they're going to be doing, and that is not just like a random nothing plot line. This is going to be one of the big plot lines in the entirety of the Winds of Winter, the invasion of Fagon. Just having a quick flick through. Adam Alolo saying, what do you think is going to happen with House Dane, Gerald Dane and Edric Dane? What will their larger impact be? Actually, one thing I didn't mention before, when I was talking about the raiding, Euron doing raiding, if you actually look, where's the next place along the coast after you've done Old Town that you get to, it's actually Starfall. So House Dane, if the sword Dawn is taken from there, it might be, yes, we might think of being Gerald Dane, I think, will take it and claim it, but he could justify it as, I'm just protecting it from Euron's raids, because that it would be a fear that Euron would come all the way down around the south coast and attack Starfall. It's entirely possible. In terms of their larger impact, so Gerald Dane is going to end up, I think, also a part of supporting Aegon, and he will be bringing Lightbringer into the story effectively. I think that Dawn is Lightbringer, so I think he's bringing that into the story, and I think it will end up with Jon, and Jon will use that, I suspect tragically, to be killing Dany. So that's what's going on there. In terms of the House Dane as a whole, I think their role has been historical rather than anything else in particular. They're obviously at the Tower of Joy, absolutely central, but also keeping hold of the Sword of Dawn all that time. So their role is going to be historical rather than a huge role in this bit of story. Sasak saying, Eric Harker, you're just trying to get Robert to swear. I mean, I would never do such a thing. Mattia Dominique, do you think the animosity between the Reachmen and the Dornish is ever going to settle during this series? I mean, there will always be some animosity there, but it will only properly settle if there is a shared threat. Now, we will end up with some members of... if Dawn are coming up behind Fagon, then we're going to see some members of the Reach who are going to be coming up behind Cersei, like I think House Tarly will, but it's a matter of whether they can all see the threat from the others. Oh, Reflective Rambling, you've just picked this one up, saying, do you think the animosity between the Reachmen and the Dornish is ever going to settle during this series? Thank you so much, Reflective Rambling. You do this a lot, picking up other people's questions. Thank you. I just picked that one up myself. So the Reachmen, it's not, the animosity is not all the way across the Reach. It's mostly, so the Dornish marches, which is the sort of the area closest to Dawn, and the Marcher Lords, and there's a whole series of them. We know about the Tarlys, but there are a few others all around there as well. Those are the ones with the history of grudges against the Dornish. The further into Reach you get to House Hightower, House Tyrell, and the like, then it's not as personal. Yes, they have lost people in the past and all the rest of it, but it's simply a matter of physical proximity. Mod Mary, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, I've been a fan of all the content creators and would be content with you all finishing these books. I've given up on GRRM. Winter came to Texas and we are all frustrated. Color me grey. Well, yes, I heard about Texas. You're getting unseasonable weather and the electricity's gone, which I'm very sad to hear about. I hope you get your power back soon if that is affecting you. But Mod Mary, yes, there are many wonderful content creators here in this world. I would highly recommend you check out as many of them as you possibly can. Chris Frazier, thank you so much, saying, just found your channel and have been listening to your Lord of the Rings playlist all day at work. You are amazing. Thank you. That's very kind. Yeah, I've got more Lord of the Rings content coming next week as well. So keep an eye out for that. And I think the next one I'm going to do is what actually is pipeweed. So if you've ever wondered, then I will be answering that one next. Reflective Rambling saying, being fertile farming land, surviving area, citadel, acolytes, all the damage in store for King's Landing. Could the Reach become a new or temporary seat of power in a reconstruction era? It could, but the citadel, Old Town, will be destroyed. I think King's Landing will be or largely destroyed. King's Landing will be largely destroyed. I do wonder whether Harrenhal might be a place that they could have as a sort of a temporary home. It seems to be capable. It has become temporary cities on a number of occasions over the history of the world of Ice and Fire. Okay, I think Rennie's Peach saying we all know what pipeweed is. Yeah, well, Tolkien told us, in fact, and so I shall let you know. So there we go. Just got power back in Dallas. Delighted to hear that. Okay, I think with that, I am going to pull this one to a close. Next time, where should we go next time? Shall we head down into Dawn? Let's do Dawn next, I think. But if you want more of these videos, if you're watching a little bit later, then appearing up around here will be a link to my playlist of other live streams. If you'd like to support the channel, if you want to get access to some of the benefits that my patrons get, like priority questions for these live streams, like some content I create just for my patrons, so you get my readings of the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter and so on, there will be a link appearing somewhere around here. Okay, that's all for this week. I shall see you again next week. Take care.